Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Get Cooked. My name's Sarah Cook, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Olympic silver medalist and co-founder of 776 BC and former Australian rowing team member, Cam McKenzie-McHarg. Cam, welcome and thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Sarah. Excited to have the chat.
Excellent. Well, let's get stuck in, and I'd actually like you to take us to probably one of the peaks or highlights of your career, which was that men's 4 race at the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games. From your perspective, can you talk us through that final of the men's 4 and how that played out from your memory?
Yeah, it's a bittersweet sort of memory for reflecting on the Beijing race, and it was a campaign that we sort of only got together sort of 4 months before, and so it was a new combination in that 4, and but we clicked really quickly, and so the guys in the boat, James Marburg, Francis Hegarty, and Matt Ryan. We had experience rowing in different sort of crew boats before that, but then jumping in the 4, and we had to go and qualify in the qualification event before the Beijing Olympics. So it had this really intense build-up to the Olympic final, which, and then when I reflect on how I felt on the start line of that race, I don't think I've been as calm on a sort of, start line for a big race than what I sort of felt on the start line of the Beijing Olympics, which is really weird because you would sort of expect to be really nervous at that stage, but I felt like we'd gone through a really intense, campaign into getting there and going through the qualification events. Any crew that's ever gone through that, the experiences, that's pretty intense. And then we had another sort of intense sort of thing that occurred within that event where Matt Ryan got food poisoning at the 11th hour, and we had to bring in a reserve. So we went through all these things just to sort of get to the Olympic final. And so, we sort of, sat on the start line. We felt really calm, and our race plan was to try to get out in front and control the race. The GB crew had a history of sort of leading that event and, really sort of dominating from the first 500 and sort of, just then sort of that's how they carved out their wins. And so we were sort of like, well, let's try to get in front and control the race. And we executed a really good race plan. So, I think that was the other thing. We had a lot of confidence that the race plan we had sort of put together, we were really sort of familiar with what we're trying to do at every step of the way. And so, the gun went. We got out sort of cleanly. I think it must have been sort of half a second at the 500 metres, and then really good rhythm, sort of, stretched out to half a length at sort of the 1,000 metre mark, and we were in control of the race. So it was sort of, exactly sort of how we'd planned. 500 metres to go, or about 750 metres to go, we sort of had a push to try to break free. And if there's one thing that I sort of reflect on, I sort of go, could we have held off that push a little bit later? Because it was almost like that, mental sort of idea of going towards the line at that point. But then if you're in control of a race, then, do you hold off a little bit longer so then, you just have that momentum all the way through to the finish line? Because we sort of pushed hard at 750, and it didn't really sort of eke out too much extra distance. And then in the last 200 metres, we sort of started to really, I suppose, just hit the red line, and GB put together a massive sprint and overtook us in the last 100 metres, which, sort of, and that's the thing. It was bittersweet. Like, we executed a great race plan, and when I reflect back, it's like, well, we did everything we tried to do in that race, and we did it really well. And GB sort of, managed to pull off an awesome sprint to the line, and we got pipped, and so, I sort of feel really lucky that we sort of landed in that 4 and got that opportunity to run that campaign over that year, and there was so many great experiences from it. And to just miss out on an Olympic gold medal, I sort of, reflect on, daily or every second day. But the joys of sort of being part of a successful campaign, it was just so cool. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I rode down the course on watching that final, and I think it was only an hour, and Australia won 2 gold medals and the silver medal in the men's double, men's pair and men's four. It was an incredible day in Beijing, winning those medals for the Australian rowing team, and so much buzz and momentum. And I wasn't in a medalling crew or an A-final crew myself, but it was so incredible to be a part of that and to witness that. And the race that you guys had was so amazing, watching down the course, and I think everyone's hearts were in their throat in that last 500 metres, but you're up against such a formidable British crew. We know, I guess, the pedigree of the British men's team under Jurgen, that men's four, it's almost like they were not gonna let you guys take it from them on the day. And looking at the guys who are in that four, I mean, it really is probably one of the best British men's fours that whole program has turned out.
Yeah, they were guys that had been in that combination for a long time. You know, obviously Jurgen had the golden touch sort of going, and I don't know how long. It's 6 sort of or 7 Olympics in a row where he's won a gold medal, and so yeah, I think sort of that mentality within the sort of squad of just super confident about the idea of going out and winning, and get into an Olympic Games, and that's the expectation. And yes, there's a lot of pressure, but obviously when sort of you've got that kind of experience amongst the crew, at all sort of pressure points of the race, that's sort of something that they obviously were really well sort of drilled on and sort of got them across the line. And look, I mean, I think we had the right mix in the boat to win. We probably just didn't have the maturity as a combination to sort of just go, we know how to win at all sort of parts of the race, and so that's just sport and racing, isn't it?
Well, considering that you guys, presumably suffered a bit of a disappointment at the selection trials to not be in a qualified boat, you went through the late qualifications, you had illness and a sub in for the final at the qualifiers. You only had 4 months in total together, and as you say, you're up against not only a crew but a squad that had huge momentum and longevity and consistency in their boats. It is pretty remarkable to have almost pulled off the win, but still to have come away with an Olympic silver medal under those conditions is quite remarkable.
Yeah, and that's part of the sort of where I reflect and go, we're pretty lucky because
I don't know if it was luck.
well, yeah, there's always an element. I mean, yes, in terms of luck of getting into a combination that could click so quickly within 4 months, because and you've been in plenty of crew boats. That there's some crew boats you jump into and it'll take 2 years before you start to really feel like it, it's clicking and you can produce really good speed. And then there's others where it just immediately, feels right. And also, I'll say, the big factor there was that just the mentality of the sort of four boys in the boat and Tim Conrad, our coach, everyone sort of just immediately aligned, and, we had a clear purpose in terms of getting to the qualification event and getting through. Our goal was to get to an Olympic Games. So, that was our starting point. And almost the coolest experience about that whole campaign was that was our aim, to get to an Olympic Games, so get to the qualifying event and get in the top 2 spots. But we turned up to the Lucerne World Cup, and that was the sort of leading event to the Olympics, and everyone was turning up there, and we had low expectations in terms of where we were going to finish up, but we just wanted to make sure we were sort of beating any boat that was going to try to do the qualifying event. And we won our heat by sort of half a second. We're like, oh, this is looking pretty good. And we won our semi, and we're like, geez, this is not bad. And then we went out and won the final, and it was just such a cool, experience in terms of turning up very sort of little sort of expectations of what we're going to produce, and to end up putting together a regatta like that was just, in terms of a confidence booster, that was sort of a massive sort of boost to our campaign, and then we went on from there. So and winning in Lucerne, that's fun. Yeah, it's a good place to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think everyone that I've spoken to, when we get to the your favourite rowing course to row on, that's been a pretty consistent winner in terms of everyone's favourite place, and it's referred to as the Mecca of rowing. So it's not a bad place to get a race win.
No, it was good fun that weekend.
So let's go back now to the start of your career. Can you tell us how you found the sport of rowing? Because I understand you're pretty handy with a footy.
Yeah, so I grew up in the country, Leongatha, which is about 2 hours southeast of Melbourne. Leongatha's got a population of 5,500, 6,000 people, so a small country town. You know, you played sport. There was no rowing in Leongatha, but there was plenty of, you know, football, cricket, tennis, everything. And I was like, you know, that typical Australian sort of country kid who loved playing, you know, any kind of sport that was available. And then in year 10, I went up to boarding school at Scotch College, and rowing, I mean, I'd already had sort of, I suppose, the buzz of the Olympic sort of, you know, thing going on, seeing the, you know, 92 Olympics and 96 Olympics. And so there was that sort of idea of, you know, that was the mecca of sport. And when I got to Scotch, rowing was obviously a big sport in the sort of school program. And I was sort of like, well, you know, I'd love to have a crack at, you know, rowing and sort of see what I can do there, just purely because it was, you know, sort of a big sport. And also there was always, at that time, there was the aura of the awesome foursome sort of going on. So they'd just gone back to back, and sort of 96, they'd won their second Olympic gold. And I think that sort of, you know, and that was a great time for Australian rowing, because, you know, it pushed the sport into, you know, a sort of a really great profile. And the awesome foursome guys, you know, they were sort of, you know, big profiles around, you know, just sport in general. And so I think the idea of rowing being a sport that was, you know, super exciting to get involved in, and then going to Scotch College, that sort of all lined up. And so I jumped in the boat down there. I'll sort of say I had an unsuccessful start to my rowing career, where I think it was about the third weekend, and I jumped on the rowing machine and did a really good time on the ergo, and the coach was like, at the time the thirds coach was sort of in the boathouse, and he sort of said, oh, well, you know, come down tomorrow morning and we'll put you in the third crew. And this was me sort of 3 weeks into sort of rowing, and I was like, oh, this is a pretty good start, sort of, you know, coming from nowhere to jumping in the thirds. And I came down that next morning, and I didn't start in the boat. He sort of put me in the speedboat, and then sort of 15 minutes in, threw me into the four seat and said, okay, so just sit back and follow the rest of the boys. And the coxswain said, you know, okay, let's row. And within about sort of 5 strokes, the coach said, easy oar, and he was like, Cam, jump out. And so put me back in the speedboat, and then I had to sort of navigate coming up the normal way. So I sort of started that year in the sevenths, but it, you know, the sport of rowing immediately clicked to me. You know, I loved the training, I loved the competitive aspect of sort of, you know, what you did in the sport, and so that sort of immediately clicked. But then, you know, I did have a big passion for football, and I was fortunate enough to get drafted to the Western Bulldogs at the end of my school, so at the end of year 12, and went down to the Western Bulldogs for a year and a bit to play down there, and that was a great experience. I was on the senior list, and I didn't get a senior game, and they were a really good team at that time, so that sort of the young guys weren't getting much of a look in, but just that experience of, you know, professional elite sport was just, you know, again, sort of as a kid growing up, to be able to get into the AFL. But it's sort of funny, my sort of ultimate passion seemed to just really be, you know, trying to get to an Olympic Games. Like, you know, if I could do that, and it was leading into the Sydney Olympics sort of time too, and there was such a big buzz in the country about the Olympics, and I sort of had this kind of, you know, magnetic sort of, you know, pull to going, okay, you know, I love football and I think I could carve out a career here, but the Olympics is the ultimate. And so I switched back to rowing. Not obviously a great financial decision, but I don't regret it at all.
And, you know, one of the things that I find, certainly being involved with schools and in speaking to a number of school coaches, is kids wanting to specialise in a sport probably too early. So, you know, you obviously followed your rowing and your footy to the end of school. Do you think it's important to, I guess, have a bit more of a holistic or general approach to building strength and fitness and athletic development before going down that specialist pathway?
Oh, massively. And I think that's almost, it's one of the biggest errors in sort of our approach to sport at that level, is to be able to give sort of, kids the experience in all these different areas, and sort of thinking that having to specialise too early is then the only sort of way to be able to get, to that successful sort of, end point in terms of, national representation or into the AFL. I think it's funny because I have this conversation with quite a lot of boys who say they've got to focus on their AFL at school level because they want to get drafted and all this, and rowing provides almost the best physical preparation in terms of, a program that gets you so much in terms of your physical fitness. You're going to be streets ahead of any other AFL sort of wannabe as you get towards the draft. And so every time I talk to them, I'm like, there's no other program you're going to be able to do that's going to better equip you for the fitness component of the sport of AFL than what you probably can achieve in a rowing program. So I'm always, and just that, I suppose, interest and excitement of just trying different things. And, you might be sort of one tracked in one direction, but it's ultimately not where you should sort of, be trying to get to. And so, I'm a big believer that at a young level, you should just be throwing yourself into everything. And I think it's sort of gone through a couple of phases, hasn't it? Because I feel like we've gone through a real specialisation phase, and now I think people are starting to come around to the fact that you need to be a bit broader sort of minded in terms of how you get involved in sport.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of research of late. I think that's taking some time to probably translate down to the kids, and that's the conversation I have as well, is to say that there is not a sport that's going to prepare you better, even if you want to be a rugby player, an AFL player, or a netball player, or a hockey player. In terms of your summer, there's not going to be a sport that teaches you discipline, organisation, teamwork, time management, fitness, strength, like rowing. And also the great thing about rowing is that unlike many other sports at a school level, you can go to the state and national championships. You could make an Australian junior team. You could go on a pathway to a US college or an Australian university on a scholarship. So rowing is truly a global sport, and I think opens up a lot of opportunities that many other school sports don't.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's the thing, like, from, just the pure sports sort of aspect, then all the other sort of associated sort of skills and, I suppose characteristics that you build to be a good rower, and sort of all the sort of, being organised and really sort of diligent with your time. And then just, it's a team sport, and everyone in rowing knows this, but like it's a team sport that requires you to really sort of click and understand people within your boat and get the best out of sort of everyone in it. And so that's a skill set that, you carry on for the rest of your life. So, we're biased, but, I think we're pretty lucky to have found the sport of rowing.
Yeah, absolutely. Those transferable skills, so important, as you say, for your whole career. But what advice specifically would you give to young rowers maybe coming to the end of their school time, or just have left school and are in the club? And it can be a bit of a daunting transition, can't it, into club level? And, maybe they're not sure if they want to follow the elite pathway, but what advice would you give to young rowers who are just starting out in that pathway?
I think the important thing to realise is that, if you're going to make that step, the next step doesn't have to be to the very top of, being in the Australian team. And the other thing too is like, to be a really successful rower at an Olympic level, it just takes time. And so, you've got to sort of stay, I suppose, enthused about why you sort of joined the sport initially, and, be involved at a level that, fits with you when you sort of finish school. And that means that some kids finishing school, it might be a really good idea that they don't try to get into an Australian team, but they stay involved at a club level. They race at the nationals, and then, there's opportunities with some of the clubs to go and race at, Henley or sort of Head of the Charles, or, some events where great competition, really sort of, serious in terms of, the training that you have to do for it. But it's a bit more fun in terms of just the aspect of staying involved in the sport at a good level. And then, being able to sort of step up that sort of next season, is sort of, then a logical step. But I think, sometimes the message feels like it's a one-stream sort of model to stay involved in the sport. And it's like, no, it doesn't have to be like that at all. And I mean, that's where the sort of clubs play a really important role of sort of you can sort of be involved at a level that fits better with sort of what you want to be doing at that time. But I think the key thing is the involvement sort of piece, and it's the thing I miss now is that not being involved day to day within a rowing squad and rowing club environment is the biggest part you miss. And so I sort of think the idea of when you finish school to identify a club that you want to sort of be involved in and get down there. It's one of the greatest sort of parts of the sport is just the people that you sort of then get to train with every day. And so I mean, like, that's probably not a simple answer in terms of going, oh, okay, now I know the answer to it, but I think just making sure that it's something that does sort of fit with you and you sort of stay really enthused about why you're in the sport, and it doesn't have to be a all or nothing kind of approach to it.
Yeah, I think that's really important. You hit on a couple of points there, which are, yes, that high performance pathway exists, and if you want to go to the Olympics or the Australian teams, that's just going to take time and consistency. And rowing is a sport that we know that rewards longevity and consistency. The average age for most Olympic medalists is in their late 20s or even their early 30s. So, there's not a time pressure there from that sense. But I think what I really love about what you're saying is that involvement of the club, and we've both been involved with our clubs post our rowing careers, certainly at an administrative level, and being part of that family I think is just so special. And that's what I love about our sort of cultish sport, that you've sort of always got that family to come back to and to be a part of, and to give back to your clubs and be involved in that capacity as well, even once the elite side is over. But going to Henley, going to the Head of the Charles, real bucket list, like life best experiences there that you've touched on too. So many avenues for the sport. Yeah,
and it's true. I mean, like, I'm not probably speaking to those ones that are really sort of keen on getting into the Australian team because, and that would have been me when I finished school. I was just going, that's what my ambition is and that's what I'm going to do. It's more those sort of people that love the sport but not sure how to sort of, keep it as part of their life when they've sort of got a whole lot of other things that, are sort of, popping up. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And you competed at the London 2012 Olympic Games. How was that campaign in the men's 8 as compared to your Beijing campaign? Obviously not the same outcome at the end of it, but were they quite different?
Yes, they were. I mean, look, this is sport, and it's sort of, I don't want to be controversial in terms of my sort of thoughts and reflections on the London campaign, but it's certainly, we had a crew of really sort of great athletes, and so, our potential that sort of sat within the boat in our London 8 was really sort of strong. One of the things I reflect in terms of, things that we probably didn't get right was we had two coaches, sort of really well-credentialed coaches that individually I think would have been really good at being able to coach our crew into a sort of successful campaign that year. And it was a decision to nominate or select two coaches to coach the men's 8. And the things sort of I learnt out of, the 8 campaign is that when you get more people in a boat, it just has to be a simpler message. More people means that, you want less confusion about what you're working on, what's the program, what's our sort of aims. And when you've got two voices, and even, look, they were sort of coaches that had similarities, so they had crossover in terms of what they were sort of, trying to do, but then also quite different approaches to how 8 or a sort of campaign should run. And they worked really hard at trying to mesh that, but you could just always tell that it wasn't sort of a really clear sort of message. And so, I mean, look, that was an aspect of the sort of campaign that I think ultimately wasn't sort of a successful setup for an Olympic campaign, and any campaign in an 8. I think it's a pretty rare set of circumstances where you can have an 8 that's co-coached by two people, and it it does go back to that simplicity of a message. But and then sort of we had an up and down season in terms of really good speed at some sort of races, but then sort of falling way off. And in the Olympic final, it's sort of a great and horrible race to watch. Great from a spectator's perspective because I think all the boats sort of finished, within 2 seconds, and we missed out on a medal by half a second and finished sixth. And I remember, so when we crossed the finish line, and Matt Ryan, who was in the bow seat, yelled out and sort of thought that we'd pipped and got into third. And I was like, I had no idea where we were. So I was like, geez, that's amazing, because I didn't think we were sort of in it. And then the scoreboard sort of showed up, and the Germans sort of won, Canada second, and it took a long time for the third to show up, and GB had just got into third position. And then I think it was the US, and I was like, oh, well, we didn't finish fourth. And then it was the Netherlands, and we didn't finish fifth, and we finished sixth. And I was like, oh. So it was like, a really close finish. And when I reflect on the campaign and sort of areas that we could have got right, sort of, and we didn't, it was sort of a campaign that was, a little bit frustrating, but then again, goes back to that, combination of, how a crew and a coach and all that clicks together, and then how easy it is just to get on to, going fast. And we had some certain sort of barriers in that campaign where it just didn't make it as simple and easy as what it should have been. But and the London Olympics was a great event. Certainly sort of going from winning a medal into finishing sixth, sort of, you're there to, get a sort of, your best race on that final day. And when you don't feel like you've really put it together, there's some sort of frustration, but then I always just, rock myself to sleep, and I just go, well, that's sport. It's sort of the great thing about sport is that it's not easy to put together a performance. And so, when you get it right, it's awesome, and it's, you should really enjoy it and celebrate it. And when you get it wrong, then there's plenty of thinking time as to, figuring out what you do better next time.
Totally. Yeah, like the rest of your life. I've been there. So towards the end of your rowing career, you and your wife, Kate, started 776 BC. Can you tell us a little bit about where that idea came from and how it's evolved?
Well, it was, I suppose, one of the catalysts was spending a lifetime in sports gear and lycra, and sort of, and that was, and fortunately now I still get to do that. So it's sort of one of the great aspects of building a sports apparel business. But I obviously had a great passion for sport, and wanted to try to combine some of that sort of passion into building a business, and then the experience in sort of training and racing in a lot of sort of different sort of gear, felt like that there was opportunities to produce fantastic performance gear for Olympic athletes, where really sort of reflecting on what the Olympic athlete does in terms of their own preparation, and then sort of reflecting that in the gear that they wear, was something that we wanted to work on. And Kate had a marketing background, and so she sort of came with a whole lot of sort of skills that really critical to putting a business like this together. And we were pretty passionate about building our own business. I think as an athlete, you're sort of building your own sort of performances and seasons, and having that control of what you're wanting to really do was a big part of why I love sport, and sort of and what made me really sort of get out of bed in the morning. And I think then there's a natural sort of fit then into building your own business, and so the idea at the sort of starting point was that we wanted to build a brand and business that sort of really aligned with fundamentally Olympic sports and Olympic athletes, and to work really closely with those athletes to develop the world's best performance gear. And so feels like a lifetime ago in some aspects when we first started, because we started in 2012 just testing out some gear, and then sort of I think in some respects rowing's sort of been a really good preparation for building a business, because to get great at rowing takes time and a lot of dedication and hours, and sort of learning about how you get better. And certainly the case in building this business is that there's so many sort of moving parts, and there's so many sort of aspects of what we've been putting together that it didn't really have sort of any experience that sat around it, and so you got to sort of just work really hard at putting those pieces together. But I mean, I feel so lucky to sort of do what we're sort of doing, and the idea that we can sort of, and this is me sort of personally, stay involved in sport and stay connected to sort of Rowing Australia and sort of the athletes that we get to still work with there, and then some of the other sort of things that we do in different sports. It's so cool, like and to get up every morning and sort of have the ability to shape what we're sort of trying to do and put together is just an awesome journey. It's really hard, like the challenges that sort of sit around sort of building what you're trying to build, and we're trying to be the best in the world, and so any athlete will understand how hard it is to be the best in what they're doing, and so you never there's no finish line with sort of what we're doing, so but it's been good fun.
So, it's clear that it's taken passion, hard work, patience. For any other athletes out there who are maybe considering entrepreneurship, what are some of the transferable skills that you've been able to take from your learnings as an athlete into your business?
Oh, look, I mean, there's sort of, some of the core ingredients, and it's, I think sort of persistence is key. Like, one of the things that sort of I've thought about, through building this business is that there's going to be times along the journey where it just starts to feel too hard, and there's too many aspects that sort of, are hurdles that are sort of popping up, and initially you don't see a way through in terms of how you get to that next sort of stage. And again, sort of, biased, but reflecting on rowing, like, there's a lot of stuff in rowing which is not fun. Like, there's a lot of early mornings, and there's a lot of hard work, and there's a lot of ergo sessions that they're not fun, but they're really important to do and do well to get to ultimately where you're trying to get to. And so you learn sort of the idea of just persisting through some really tough times within a training program that you need to sort of, get through to go to sort of a national championships or go to, a world championships. And so that persistence, quality is, just key, because some of the other skills and aspects that you'll need along the way are really important. But if you don't have that persistence, then, you're not going to be able to use them. And so, and I think sort of, being able to find a way through when sort of things feel like, there are these big roadblocks is sort of key. And then the other thing too is sort of being really clear on, where you're trying to get to. And like, as an athlete, that's sometimes a lot simpler, because, the Olympic Games might be your ultimate goal. So it's really sort of clear as to, this is where I'm trying to get to, and this is, then the next steps as to what I need to do to get there. And in business, it's probably a little bit harder to work out, for everyone what they want to ultimately get to. But so we spent a lot of time building a business plan and sort of really sort of talking through what was the, business and the brand that we wanted to put together. Ultimately, where do we want to get to with it? What do we want it to stand for? Who was it supposed to represent? And did a lot of sort of, deep thinking around, the kind of business that we're trying to put together before we really started. And it's remarkable, like, we haven't wavered too far from, what we sort of initially started on at all. And I think because we did that sort of homework to begin with. And so like anything, like, before the start of a season, being really clear with sort of, what ergo score you want to get and what sort of crew you want to get into, and what result you'd like to get at that end of the season. And, sort of, I think the idea of documenting that, putting it on a piece of paper, put it on your wall, and then you sort of have to, almost live up to those kind of ideas that you sort of put down. So, there's a lot of things I could keep going on, but
Yeah, so I think the key is, in sport, you have those long and those short-term goals, and in business, being really clear about what that vision and your mission are, and knowing the difference between the two and having clarity around that. And it's interesting hearing you talk about maybe that bit of ambiguity once you get out into the business world, as opposed to sport, where it's very clear what your outcome is. It's a world championship gold medal, or it's crew selection, or it's qualifying for the Olympics, or it's winning an Olympic gold medal. And Kim Brennan, I listened to her in a webinar just yesterday, actually, and she said exactly the same thing. So that is, I think, an area where as athletes, we come from a pathway that's very clear, the end point is very defined, and then how do you actually create maybe those kinds of goals or outcomes in your business life or in your corporate life after you move out of rowing is definitely a skill. So it sounds like you guys are nailing it.
Well, yeah, we're working on it. I mean, it's like the hardest thing to sort of, I think, transition from being an athlete, where I reflect back on being an athlete and just some of the really nice simplicity of a training program, which is predictable, an end goal, and sort of, the things that you're working on, and, that's measurable, so you can sort of see if you're improving, and all those things are really, should be really clear for you. And at times when you're in the program, you feel like it's mundane and it's boring and it's a big Groundhog Day. But I reflect back now and I go, it's so beautifully simple in terms of what you're putting together and where you're trying to get to. Whereas in business, there's so many unpredictable things that can occur, and my weeks always look different. Every day looks different in terms of things that are popping up, and so trying to sort of be adaptable and sort of adjust to all these things that are sort of no one planned for a global pandemic in 2020, and now we're sort of in this sort of stage where you're just constantly dealing with new things. So it's being able to adjust and be sort of adaptable is one of the key sort of aspects in business, which I've had to learn and adjust to.
Yeah, absolutely. And in addition to starting up your business, 8 years ago now, you've also had a beautiful daughter, and you've got another one on the way in 2 weeks. So what has parenthood taught you?
I know, it's a lot of fun, a lot of hard work again too. Sophia's now, she's 3, almost 3. She's a beautiful little girl, and it's funny, like sort of it teaches you. Well, I mean, everyone talks about this, and it sort of puts your life into perspective a little bit in terms of what's important. And, even in the last sort of 6 to 12 months, and, the exciting part of being a parent and seeing a little one sort of grow up is, all that boring stuff you do in your day-to-day life becomes exciting again because they're sort of doing it for the first time. And the conversations that you're now having, which are just, you're sort of laughing a lot more because, you're sort of seeing her try things and come out with stuff she's saying, which you have no idea where she heard sort of, some of that stuff. But it's been a lot of fun. And I mean, in some aspects, because we were building our own business, and there was a lot of moving parts associated with that, having sort of a child meant that it wasn't a massive transition, because she was another sort of, moving sort of part to what we're sort of, doing within our lives. And I'm sure in 2 weeks' time we'll find out another new chapter of, complexity and moving parts in terms of dealing with 2. So that should be good fun. But it's been great fun. Like, a lot of late nights, early mornings, sort of hard work, trying to understand how you balance everything that you're trying to do within 1 week. But you wouldn't change it. And it's it always grounds you pretty. You can have a pretty crappy day at work, and then you come home and she has no idea, or doesn't care at all whether you've sort of had to battle through some sort of average stuff, and she's smiling and laughing, and that sort of changes things pretty quickly. So
Yeah, I think you just highlighted something for me, that you really do find joy in the day-to-day and the mundane, which pre-children I absolutely didn't, but now you do. It's I want to race home from work to see my daughter, so I totally understand what you're talking about. It is such a special time, especially when they're little.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of, it just gets better too. Well, and then maybe they hit their teens and it goes,
and it just regresses.
And we'll have to navigate through that. But
yeah, exactly. I'll ask you when she's about 15 and see how you're faring. Yeah.
It's like, can you look after her for a couple of weeks?
You recently completed a 6-week, pretty grueling erg training program, and you completed a sub 6-minute 2K. Firstly, why did you do that? And secondly, do you have any other athletic challenges on the horizon?
Why did I do that? And that's a good question.
I
There's
did
a
the
whole lot of
program for
things I
like a
could have
week.
done, and not to call out a sub 6-minute 2K. No, the reason, I mean, like, with the world sort of going into lockdown and then, sort of having the opportunity to, I suppose, have a bit more structure to, just jumping on the row machine. It's funny because the row machine, I've had one sort of either in the office or at home for the last 5 or 6 years, and I've fallen into that trap of every sort of second or third week jumping on and sort of doing a session and then feeling horrible at the end of it and going, I don't want to take that for another 2 weeks, and then I'd talk myself into jumping back on. And so the idea was, and the other sort of catalyst, I think, so I just turned 40 and I was like, well, I want to sort of jump into my 40s in, the right sort of direction and sort of stay fit and then the idea of having a target. And this is sort of something that even through running the program, so it was a 6-week sort of program designed to, sort of do a 2K test at the end of it. I thought a sub 6 minute, you always sort of think that you're fitter than what you probably are, but a sub 6 minute was probably pretty ambitious, and particularly because I hadn't been doing too much on the ergo. And so it was the idea of just having a really clear target. And then stupidly, but sort of fortunately, I called it out to everyone that that's what I was doing, which I think actually...
It's good. Hold you accountable.
It certainly did. I was sort of like, okay, I've told a lot of people I was going to do this. And so, and it was pretty tough, the program. So it was all about sort of trying to sort of work out, could I just put together a program of really intense sessions to get a result? So it was a bit of experimentation too, to sort of just figure out how to get a result without spending, sort of 6 months on an ergo. And it hurt, Cookie. Like the last 250
I don't doubt it.
And I reflected on this afterwards. So I did it, 5:59, and I thought I was set up for a better score, but I reflected afterwards, the reason you train, 11 months, 12 months of a year to race on that final day and feel great about the full 2K distance is that, staying on the red line for, 6 minutes is an intense physical sort of, achievement or thing that you have to sort of, put your body through. And I got to probably about 700 meters to go, and I was doing all the sort of, why am I doing this? And then sort of 500 meters to go, I was like, I've got to get under. And the last 250, it hurt a lot. I was sort of, I was really battling I don't think my body was used to sort of operating with a full dose of lactate in the system for a long time. And so I just scraped through, but then, it was an awesome sort of 6-week intense program to, try something, and I was lucky just to get under. But then what's been good is that on the back of it, I sort of feel motivated to go and do, some other things. There's some people doing some ridiculous things on the ergo sort of at the moment in lockdown. There was a former AIS athlete, Dan, he did 10 marathon ergos in 10 consecutive days.
Was that Dan Ellis Flynn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nuts. Crazy.
That is crazy. I have no desire to do that.
Just amazing. And he said, so I texted him and said, that's just crazy that you've, managed to achieve that, because I was going to try to jump on and do one marathon. And he said, he's been flat out at work for the last, sort of fortnight. He had to get up at 3:30 in the morning to start them. So every morning he got up at 3:30 to do this marathon ergo, 10 consecutive days. And then I read, I think it was 2 days ago, this Chinese guy broke the world record for the marathon and averaged 1:39. And I mean, that's just crazy.
That is crazy.
So I sort of reflect on what I did, and I was like, okay, well, that's good, but, there's some other things that sort of I could have a crack at too. So it's got me motivated. But the other sort of thing I learned is that I've probably not sort of, locked into doing something over the last 5 or 6 years because I'm too busy. And I'm like, oh, I can't do it. I'm too busy. And then I think when you're too busy, it's a cop out. It's an excuse. And if you are busy, having a target on something you're trying to do is more important, because it's so easy just to go, oh, I'm just too busy, today or this week to sort of, actually lock into something. But there's always time if you want to sort of, make time for it. And then, my emotional sort of state is always aligned with how much exercise I'm doing. So I always feel great after exercise. And so it's just a really important sort of part of trying to keep consistent with it. So I don't know if I'll do
that.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll do a 2K again in the next sort of, next week. But yeah, it was good fun to have a crack at.
Yeah, well, let's see how you go with that newborn as well. That might change things up a bit. But so let's go now to our Fast Five. So our final 5 questions of the interview. Quick answers here. What's your favourite rowing course to row on?
Well, Lucerne's great, but Lake Bled, I think, was
yeah.
the most beautiful course I've ever been to. So Lake Bled for me. Not great, but beautiful.
Yes, I tell people it's like something from a Disney movie with the castle on the hill and the church on the island, and yeah, amazing. Top track to erg to?
Oh, I don't know. Well, I don't ask Matt Ryan. He's always, if I'm doing a session and he's always controlling the soundtrack, he's usually sort of locked into the 80s, 90s, AC/DC, something like that. So yeah. He controls the music most of the time when I'm involved in any training with him.
Best piece of advice you've been given?
Well, that's a big one. I think writing down your goals, like write them down. Everyone's got these ideas as to what they want to do, but writing them down and actually putting them somewhere where you can actually see them makes you accountable. And so it's easy to say stuff and it's easy to dream about stuff you want to do. It's actually really hard to write it down, and then it's even harder to put it somewhere where you're going to read it. And so it was a coach back sort of when I first started Scotch rowing, and they sort of said, write your goals down, put it on the wall. And I think it works. It does work. It does.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. The career highlight to date, sporting or otherwise?
Definitely the Beijing Olympic campaign was, just an awesome experience rowing with great guys, great coach, and having a lot of sort of fun and getting some results was just awesome. And then, I think sort of the business, I love sort of doing that, but having fun with sort of our 3-year-old daughter is something that's sort of, that's pretty special.
Yeah. And the hardest session you've ever done?
There was a season we did 2003 with Antonio as our coach. It was just a haze of sort of intense sort of work and sweat. And there was a session that we used to do 4 by 7 Ks on the ergo, pretty much at test sort of max speed, 5 minutes off in between. And there was one day in Varese, it was 35 degrees. It was like just a sweat box in the sort of ergo room, and people were pretty much just falling off the ergo left, right, center. It was, it's something you would never want to revisit or never want to do in your lifetime. But that was horrible.
I love how everyone I ask that of, it's like it happened yesterday. They're like so traumatized by their hardest session. Everyone can pretty much recount those 1 or 2 sessions like as though it just happened. So yeah, good to hear that yours is still fresh in your memory.
It was traumatic. It was.
Well, thanks very much, Cam. It's been great to speak to you. I've really enjoyed hearing about not only your sporting career, but your life post-Olympic Games. So thanks very much for joining us, and all the best in the next few weeks with the arrival of your new daughter.
Thanks, Cookie. Great to chat.